In this video, we're going to continue talking about the Corgi editor and how we can use, as well as some general Unity 2D techniques using the tiling system that they've got since their 2017 release. So we're going to look at that tiling and then also how to kind of implement artwork, making platforms, checkpoints, hazards, that kind of thing. So so one of the first things to understand is that this is our minimal level. If we take a look, there is a bunch of platforms in here, and they all are labeled platform, which is very nice. And the Corgi editor comes with some standard artwork objects. These objects are chunked into pieces, 1,000 by 100. Generally, you don't want your artwork to be over 1,000 units wide, or over 2,000 for sure. Very large files and are going to give you a problem. Now, how do you assemble some artwork background and make it look really beautiful? Well, that's where tiling comes in. So tiling, if you're looking at Kenny's art assets, I'm in the base pack and tiles. Inside Kenny's art assets, we have some castle tiles, we've got some grass tiles, and each one of these is an individual piece that allows you to kind of paint a scene, and we can do it repeatedly over and over and over again, saving on artwork space. So when we were working on Madagascar, our cartridge size I think was like 8 megabytes, and we had to fit in the entire game, all the artwork. It might have even been 4. It probably was 8. So we put all this artwork together, and then we use it and repeat it over and over again. And sometimes we also assemble them. So this is all of the artwork separated. Sometimes they're also turned into a tile sheet that allows us developers to kind of quickly load in one piece, because as you can see, there's a bunch of different different brushes here that we can be using. So there's also artwork, and if you're using if you've opened the glitch artwork, you're going to want to grab this. I'm going to be looking at the alpine landscape objects. We're going to be looking at that a little bit later, but how do we implement some less squared artwork will be part of our discussion. So what I want to do now is bring in the tile sprite sheet from base pack in Kenny's art assets. I'm going to bring that into my textures folder. And I'm also going to go grab, I'm going to go grab these platform objects, anything that says platform on it. And I'm going to bring these in, but because there's so much of them, I'm going to start to need to organize this a little bit more. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to create this new folder called glitch assets. And in there, I'm going to drag in all my platforming stuff. And this will take a second to import. Bam. Okay. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. We'll get access to them. So how do we get our artwork moving around? Well, if we open up our tile sprite sheet, we can see that it's a piece of artwork. But as we remember, we need to. So the first thing we need to do is change this from single to multiple, because we want multiple bits. And we're going to hit sprite editor. We're going to hit apply, and then we are going to slice it up and just automatically do it. And that'll be great for what we need to do. Let's close this, apply and close. And now we have ourselves a bunch of different pieces of artwork. And I'm just gonna go select, here we go. Here's tiles sprite sheet 9. I'm gonna just very quickly make myself some artwork that is a platform. So I'm gonna drag out a platform object. And as we can see, it has a sprite renderer and a sprite default material, and a transform. That's it. So what we need to do is change the layer to platforms. There it is. And one other thing we need to do is add a box collider. So a box collider is the physical thing that the characters. A box collider is a physical thing that the characters touch. When we have so what we need to do is we need to collide with stuff. And right now, this does not collide. And the reason why it did not collide is because I, very foolishly, used Box Collider. So if we select this platform object, there's Box Collider 2D. So don't do as I did, and let's add the correct Box Collider. So that's one of the kind of little teeny tiny irritating things about Unity is that there's like it's useful, but it's also a little confusing to have. There's two types of Box Colliders. So we're going to add component Box Collider 2D. There we go. I bet you now it's going to work. So let's press play. And we're in our game mode. And we have our character and jump. And yeah, as you can see, we can jump on and around this, which is great. I'm happy with the fact that it's pretty easy just to kind of select and move things around. Corgi does a really good job of that. So all of this physics is, all of the jumping around and that kind of thing is based off of these whiskers and box colliders. So, in the Corgi engine, we have these raycasts that detect where collisions happen or what's going on around the scene. And raycasts are really useful. That's the way we used to do it in old school engines. There's no physics engine on the Game Boy Advanced, but we would use the raycasts to our benefit. So if you're ever playing Iron Man 2, for instance, one of the things we had to do was make it feel really fun to fly around as in your Iron Man suit, but also be able to walk around on the ground and collide with stuff normally. We were in a side-scrolling mode, so this was extremely difficult for us, especially because you couldn't really see very far in side-scrolling. It's not like in Flight where you can see 1,000 meters ahead. You have a really limited distance, and all you can really do is pull the camera out, which also makes the character smaller. And if you make the character too small, then you don't feel empowered that you're flying. And also just because we can't load a lot of that kind of stuff, like we can't, a lot of the bigger art graphics would have been difficult to do. It would look crummy. So what we did instead was we created these really long whiskers. We called them whiskers. They were raycasts, and they would detect far ahead and to above and below. We had two of them, and what they would do when you were flying was if you were about to fly straight into a wall, we would detect whether or not there was an opportunity to push you one direction or another. So if there was like an upcoming low, wall, it would detect using the bottom whisker that there's a wall coming and that there was an opening above, and it would push you up. So raycasting is really the way to go. Anyway, so let's make this platform a moving platform, because moving platforms are cooler. Because moving platforms are cooler than regular ones. So we're going to change this. Or actually, let's look at this. One-way platforms first. So one-way platforms, the layer system for Corgi engine is the way to control platform behavior. It's really simple. So if we just wanted to do that, we can change that to one way, and then we can jump through it, which is awesome. We'll do that again, jump through it. Yeah, it's really cool. Not only one-way platforms, we also have moving platforms. So let's put that to the moving platform. Now, there is one other thing we need in a moving platform component. We need moving platform. Moving platform. And in here, we can see that there's a bunch of different options. Cycle, back and forth, ascending, descending, path elements. This is the thing we need. We're going to select the size and hit 3. And we get these individual elements, and you can drag them out, and the numbers are right there in the editor. And you want to leave the 0, 1 at 0, 0, 0, because this is local to whatever the artwork is. And the movement speed, we might have 4 or 5. Acceleration type, constant speed, ease out. So if you wanted to go constantly, but there's also this animation curve, which allows you to change the animation. So maybe the speed of something, 1 is being the highest value, and then let's just add a key and make it go really slow in the middle. And then in our and then the other thing we can do is, instead of a cycle option back and forth, maybe we'll loop it, and there it'll go around and around and around. So with that quick bit and a change in the layer, we now have ourselves a moving platform that we can go jump on. And oh, it's a little hard to get on. There you go. And see how it kind of goes really fast and really slow, which is super cool. That is very easy to control. You can do a lot of work very quickly to make that happen. There is some other things. Only move when player. Here, let's make this a little bit. Only moves when the player is colliding. Reset position when player respawns. Script activated. Start moving when player is colliding. So there's some cool other extra bits and ends there. But what about respawning? We mentioned respawn. So reset position. So Corgi is really clever in their checkpoint system. So if we wanted to create a checkpoint, now that we're starting to create artwork, you can start adding artwork to your scene. So what do we do with? So how do we get our a checkpoint going so that we can create? And let's just copy this. And I'm going to move another one. And then this one, maybe is triangular. So I just want to make a different object so that we can tell where we are in the scene, and that we're at a different position. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a checkpoint. So all we need to do for that is, oops, this is the game view, create an empty game object, and then drag it to where we want, add a component, checkpoint. And it automatically creates a box collider, and creates a spawn point. And I'm going to shrink this because we need to have a way to die. Otherwise, and I'm just going to make 2 spots of death. So the checkpoint's there. Just delete that. So we're going to edit the collider, and we are going to also increase the size so that it crosses over, because the way it works is the box, oops, click the wrong thing. Let's rename this as well, checkpoint. The way it works is that the box collider will trigger off, will fire for the player. So if the player is going through the scene, you can make these checkpoints where whatever size, but anything to the X to the left will not load. Anything to the right will load. So that way you can actually load enemies in and out of the scene, or respawn things or whatever. The way to do that is to add an enemy respawner script. We're not going to do that right now. But this checkpoint will trigger and will allow us to move to the, will allow us to die and come back to this spot. So let's press play and see how that works. And if I jump off and die here, go back here. Oops. I inexpertly jumped on my platform. And now if I die on this one, there we are. We're back here at this checkpoint. Now I actually, oh, it looks like I'm spawned below or above. Where's my character in the scene? Huh. That's weird. All right, so it seems like I have a little weird bug. I was double checking to make sure I have this checkpoint here, which is the one that they have as a prefab, so you can also search that one out. You should be also able to do it this way. and it was working. It just seems like there's a bug. It might be just something in the level. I'm just going to use this checkpoint here just to demonstrate that we could also just swap them around instead of hunting down that bug in front of you. So we hit this checkpoint, and we have to make sure to touch it on the collision because it's up there. And then if we die, it'll go straight back here. So this also depends on whether or not you have multiple directions that you want to go or multiple branching checkpoints you can use. It will be whatever checkpoint you go to, and then it'll spawn whatever is to the right of it. So, how about another way to die? Since we're making some artwork, let's go in, and I just want to find some. And let's go into our textures folder, and we'll go into our tile sheet. It looks like, if we go in here, there's some fire here. I'm just going to grab one of these pieces of fire. And this is the one time where I might want to use view mode so I can expand this. I usually keep this in document mode just so it's easier to find. But in this case, we really do want it. So I'm just going to drag out some fire. And let's put it right here just so that we can deal with it easily. And right now, we want to add a component, and that component is going to be so we're going to add the fire, and I don't really necessarily know what to do here to add a hazard. So maybe there's a time when you might think about looking at the Corgi engine documentation. This is the documentation that has all the classes. So you might think, all right, I want to make something like a hazard, like a fire that damages the player. So what if I type in damage? And already I can see all the things that damage things. Damage area activate. It says Corgi engine bomb, melee weapon, damage area shape. Here's this damage on touch, damage caused, knockback direction. I'm gonna click that. And it looks like there's something in here that allows me to cause damage. There's something in here that allows me to cause damage and hit the player and push them back. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to select my sprite. I'm going to add component damage on touch. And it looks like it has a lot of different stuff that I can do. How much damage it causes, set force, damage caused, knockback, damage taken every time. So, there's a lot of different things in here. Damage taken type, damage caused type. So this is whether or not it can be destroyed as well, or if it's just a standard. One other thing we're going to need to do in order to make sure that this works is we need to actually make sure that it touches the player. So box collider 2D, add that. And then from here, if we press play, and then we add the target layer mask and set that to player. Because of course we could damage enemies, we could damage whatever. Oof. And it actually kills the player as well. So we can very quickly make a hazard just by adding damage on touch, a box collider 2D, setting the target layer mask to player, and all of this fun stuff in here is just accessible to us. So that's really what we have for the Corgi part. Now, how do we make some nice artwork? How do we do something that would make it interesting to move around the world? And how do we do it quickly without just dragging everything one by one? So the way we do that in Unity is called, I'm going to hit save. In Unity, we have a tool. So we have a new tool. And we're going to go to component, Windows 2D, and we've got this tile palette. So the tile palette, it looks like I already have some tiles in here, but we will ignore that for now. The tile palette is the way for us to quickly paint in what we want, and allows us to make selections that are maybe bigger and use stamps or so they use palettes and they're using it as like an artistic brush is each one here. I have also used I'll also use the word tiles, but this tool is really fantastic for allowing us to create our own artwork. So I'm going to create a new palette. That's going to be a castle. I'm going to call it castle. And the grid is going to be rectangle, cell size 1 by 1. And then we're just going to create this here in the textures folder. Oops. We're going to create a new folder called castle. And then we're going to select this folder. And this is going to be where we're going to add some artwork. So it says drag tile, sprite, or sprite texture assets here. So there's a bunch of artwork in here. We don't want all of it, right? We only want the castle bits. So because our artwork here is only in tile sheets, it's a little bit hard to pick out, which is why sometimes it's easier to grab individual artwork elements. But you know, I can eyeball most of this. I'm just gonna grab them all at the same time here in order to save myself a little hassle. Holding down Control click. And I might miss one or two in here. It is possible. There's about 18 per each part of Kane's. Oh, I already got this one, so I don't need it again. And I'm just going to drag them all in here, and they're going to generate some assets. So I don't need everything. I just need some things. Here we go. And so you can move them around if you hit the edit button. If you wanted to create some sort of map of them together, because like they do merge together. You could also create brushes or something that are a bit more. So you can assemble these pieces in multiple ways. So since I've already dragged that in, you know, I can drag that in again. Oops. Since I've already dragged that in, if I go into my castle folder, you know, I can drag these sprite sheets in, or these objects, these dot assets in and reconstruct multiple things. But for now, I'm just going to grab that there. Then how do I paint on it? How do I get this onto the page? That's the next step. So the way we want to do that is go into Game Object, 2D Object, Tile Map, and look at that. We now have a tile map. This is going to be good for background art, typically. So one thing we might notice, so we're going to select some of this artwork, we're going to click it, and one of the things we might notice is, look at that, the scale of the artwork is not exactly the grid size, so we kind of have to figure out how to fix. So we're going to go to we're going to do a quick fix here, and go to our tile sprite editor, and we're going to find this pixels per unit, and we want to make sure that actually it might be 70. We should investigate. Let's double check. So let's go into our tile sheet, into castle. Oops, not into castle. We need to go into the artwork itself, and then go into tiles and investigate one of these castle center properties. Details, 70 by 70 pixels, not 72. So we need to set it to 70 pixels. So generally we want to keep it 64 by 64, but that's just the way these ones are. And we're gonna hit apply. And then look at that, our artwork is seamless. It matches straight up. You know, your artwork should be high quality. And at this point, it was just not 100 units by 100 units. So now that we have that, we can fix, we've got that fixed. We can drop artwork down. We can place objects. And because this is only background art, we can just assemble it any way we want. and we can just add whatever kind of artwork we want. We're going to just press play just to put down a couple tiles. And we're walking right in front of it. The reason is because it has no colliders, and it shouldn't. So if you wanted everything to collide, though, you could do that. What you're going to want to, and I'm going to close this tile palette now. We're not going to make more with this. So how do we get the Corgi engine to interact with the tile maps? It doesn't do it perfectly, but it does do all right. The way we're going to do it is to go down to tile map, and we're going to rename this platforms. Now, what we are going to have is a tile map for each layer. So we might have one for platforms. We might have one for one-way platforms. Each tile map is going to be set up in a different area or with different colliders. Each one is going to be set up with a different layer. So we're also going to add a composite collider, which automatically adds a rigid body. We'd want this rigid body to be static, and we want it to be simulated. The composite collider, right here, geometry type outline synchronous. This should be all standard. We're going to add another thing, though. We're going to add a tile map collider 2D, and we're going to click on use by composite. So with that, we should be able to land on these platforms. Boom. And now I'm on top of them. So this is a one-way. Now, if we wanted to, we could have this as one-way platforms or whatever, but separate everything into layers in a grid. And then everything in your grid artwork will be, hunky-dory. The one other thing, though, let's say you might also need to utilize your grid to create props. So if you wanted to drop things in the world, perhaps you need to create a props folder inside your grid. And from here, we can drag stuff in, like a ladder. I'm just going to search for some of the stuff that's already in here. Go into platforms. We could drag out some platforms. And instead of keeping it in here, we could drop it under the props. And that will stick it into the grid, allow us to line stuff up. You can drop them in, put stuff up, and keep everything organized. And to that effect, so if you're using the artwork as artwork, let's go into the glitch assets. So glitch assets are quite large, and they're not exactly perfect. So what we can do, though, what if I wanted to make this artwork a little bit more interesting? And so a lot of times we will just have these extra elements here. And all we want to do is, let's see, this is about the size of that. Now, it's not exactly the size, so maybe I'll scale it down a little bit. And then I want the player to kind of walk through the middle of it. And I don't want to show this, but I still want the box collider there. Well, you can actually do that. Turn that sprite renderer off and press play. And make sure that is set to background. This might be not sorting right, but yeah. So there I am. I'm walking along this. Oops, I hit the fire. I'm walking across this. There's some tiled artwork in the background. You may want to put a player shadow or something below the character to separate it, which is all stuff you can do in Engine. But one other thing I want to point out is this tool called Tiled. It's mapeditor.org. It has been a tool that is cross-platform, and there is actually an import function for it. I've used this on professional projects. It's really great, and it is fully fledged, and there's a way to import things back and forth from Tiled. I don't know, and the plugin will be below as well. I think it's a really fantastic tool that is open source, and if you would prefer to do all your editing outside of the engine, or if you're like using this, you can export these packages out to different kind of engines. So if you had a different engine you're working on, you could quickly switch your artwork over. That could be really helpful. This also could be really helpful if you have artists that are just really not into Unity and just want to touch a 2D editor. This is a much more robust tool that allows you to do things, I think, faster and easier, but it just does require some import as well at the end. But we've covered a lot today. We've covered tiling, how to make platforms, checkpoints, and hazards. So a lot of good stuff in there. With that, I will see you in class.